So now we just discovered that we could select a game object that we created and drag and drop a script onto it, either as through the inspector to add a component of the script or to the game object itself, which achieves the same thing. Now, if I look at this inspector, I discovered that there's a transform, position, rotation, and scale, and all of that content can be updated and influenced by scripts. There's this cube mesh filter, and inside and below that cube mesh filter, that's the object that's created, is this box collider. Now the box collider, we looked at ways that we could manually add a collider to an object if it doesn't already have one. Because we created this content in Unity, it comes with a box collider. I could turn that box collider off, okay, in which case I could just walk directly through it. Alternatively, I could set, as long as this box collider is on, I could set this object or this collider as a trigger, and that's going to be important here in just a few minutes. I'll leave that unchecked for now in its default position. We also have a mesh renderer, and all of these objects, you'll notice they might have a little checkbox next to them, and that can enable or disable that component. So this rotate script, it has a checkbox next to it. We've added the component, and we could disable that component. Now when I hit play and I look at my cube, it's not doing anything. And that's because even though I have that script attached to the object, I don't have it enabled. So I'll just turn that back on. And we have the ability through scripts to talk to other objects and turn or influence or modify different components of either the object that the script is attached to or other objects in our game scene. Now, I want to start to create some simple functionality, and I'm going to start referring to my first-person camera controller, okay, my first-person controller here, as my player. Okay, this is my player object. Now, I've created a player status script, and I'll just double-click and pop this open. And when we look at this script is a little more complex than the previous script that we looked at. And the first thing we see is we see this // and then there's a little description of what this script is. And whenever you see this // and in this case my script is green, this is referred to as a comment. And if you've ever created any kind of HTML or JavaScript or CSS, you'll know that commenting the code can be very helpful. So we create these two slashes in front of any line of code, and that tells the script or the scripting engine or the compiler to say, ignore this. This isn't really code. This is some text that we can ignore. So skip that line, forget that it's there, and we can use that as we create these scripts or as we modify them. We can keep little notes and say, well, what this is really doing is updating my cube's health or ability, or my ability to pick that cube up. Because once we start modifying some scripts, this stuff can look we can get confused pretty quickly of what we're doing. It might take us a while to get into the mind frame to look at this stuff and say, oh yeah, I can modify this in some way, and we might want to put a little comment next to it to say, this is really solving this kind of problem, or updates my health, or is a tool that I might need to cross the bridge. So it's just some little notes built in our code so that we know what we're looking at. Okay, so this is a comment. Just beneath that, we have this variable statement. And what this is that we're establishing a var, which is short for variable, and we're establishing a variable called health. So we can make up words. And all we're doing is we're keeping track of, you can think of this as a label or a container or a bucket. This is a value that we can change dynamically. So we can declare a value of health, and we can tell that to equal whatever we want. And the beautiful thing about a variable is it can change. It's dynamic. Okay. We'll get back to taking a deeper dive into variables with a more thorough explanation a bit later. But this is declaring that we're going to track a variable called health. We're also going to track a variable called points. Then we find this function update, and this is the same function update that we saw inside the rotate script. Now this function update actually isn't doing anything, because when we look at functions, the function exists in between these curly brackets, and there's actually no information here. So this doesn't do anything every time the frame updates, because remember, the function update is specific to every time the frame is updated inside Unity, it executes whatever script is inside these little curly brackets. Well, beneath that, we have a new function, and it's called apply damage. And this function is all about tracking whether you ran into something that's bad. Okay, and if in fact your health gets at or below 0, it runs a little kill function. And just underneath that, there's a little program that's kill function, and all it does is say you're dead. That's it. You are dead. You hit too much bad stuff, and now you're dead. But that's okay. We're inside a game environment, and we can just start over. And so we'll just hit the play button again. And we'll be right back where we started. Underneath that, we have this function called add points, and that add points is going to take an existing amount of points and add some more points to it. And then we have this win function. So if we collect enough points, we're actually going to win. So those are just a couple of things. That's the basic logic of how this script is working. And the important thing is not that we can look at this script and say, oh yeah, I know exactly what this is doing. But just that we have a basic concept of the kinds of things that this script is keeping track of. Now, this player status script, it's really important that this player status script gets attached to the first-person controller. I'm going to click, drag, and drop. Okay, now in Unity, you can actually build scripts and attach them to any object that you want. In some cases, it doesn't matter which object that you attach them to, depending on their function. But by default, the script is talking to whatever object is attached to it. So now if I select my first-person controller, you can see that I have a player status script is the last component. Here's the player status script. There's a couple of variables that are underneath it. There's one called health and one called points. And wait a second, I think I've seen those before. I saw those somewhere before. If I go back into my player status script and take a look at it, yeah, there's two variables that were declared at the beginning of this script. One's health, one's points, and it just so happens that those are popping up as public variables. Okay, and one of the beautiful things about Unity is that when you build a variable, if it's a public variable, and you attach it to an object, now you have the ability to say, okay, well, I want to start with my health set to 100. And I want to start with 0 points or maybe 1 point. Okay, and that's a dynamic variable that's just been assigned to this first-person controller. So I have my health is 100, and my points are 1, and I'll come back to that in just a little bit, and we'll take a deeper dive into that. But the basic concept here is that I have this player status script. It's been attached to my first-person controller, and when I hit the play button, there's nothing really different about the way that I'm interacting with the world. Okay, the only thing that's happening is I'm running around, and I just so happen to have a script attached to this object, and it's not really influencing me because no matter what I do, I'm not earning points, I'm not getting hurt, so I'm not losing health, and so it's really kind of meaningless at this point. But when we start to combine scripts, one script with another, we can actually get objects to start to talk to each other. So in the next presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my cube object no longer has my rotate script. So I'm either going to delete that component or I'm going to create a new component. And the way that you can delete a component from an existing object is you go find the component, and here I want to get rid of this rotate script. If I want to get rid of this, the easiest way to do it is click on this little cog here with the down arrow. I'll just click on that, and I have the ability to remove component. Once I do, that script is no longer attached to that cube object, and it just so happens if I attach the rotate script, I could attach any number of scripts. I could have 7, 8 scripts, and they could all be doing different things to that cube. I actually don't want all those scripts attached, so I'll just remove each one of those components, and I'll get rid of that. So now I have just the basic cube, just like I created it straight from Unity. Okay, and in the next presentation, we'll add an additional script to this cube so that we can start to interact with it. We'll do that in the next presentation.